Right. Hello. I do believe that everything's now live. I have to admit, I have a history of having extremely bad technology that doesn't work, and I'm incredibly nervous today that something won't be working, like audio-wise or video-wise. So if there are any issues, please do let me know. Yeah, but if you're joining live, that's great. If not, if you're watching this in the future, also hello. Yes, if you want to know what the vibe is for this live stream, I'm literally lighting myself with a candle. We're doing old school here. No, it's just I like cozy vibes on a Sunday evening, you know? Anyway, so today I'm going to be going through the long list of the Climate Fiction Prize, which actually is quite a new thing. It only started last year in 2025. And I only found out about it recently, but I thought that's really cool. And I think it says a lot about how the genre of climate fiction is becoming, a properly recognized type of writing. And, it makes sense because climate change is going strong and we need more stories about climate change. So yeah, the prize itself, how they describe it, is that their goal is to celebrate inspiring novels that are tackling the climate crisis, and that their mission, or the reason that they think that climate fiction is important, is that for societies to fully grasp the climate change threat and to embrace its solutions, we need better stories. That's a quote from their website. And I basically couldn't agree more. I think that it's really important to have books that sort of make the reality of climate change feel real, with stories that are, have actual human or non-human characters and beings that we can relate to. It makes that, very large and scary concept of climate change and arguably the apocalypse feel just a little bit more tangible, I think. But what books can also do, of course, is imagine different kinds of futures, maybe escaping climate change, or finding solutions, or maybe not finding solutions. But either way, I think that an inspiration of imagining different futures is actually really important, because sometimes fiction has inspired real life, and scientists have been inspired by technology that's described in fiction to actually try and create it. And I think even going beyond technology, imagining a different way of living and imagining a different structure for society can be super inspiring when it comes to handling climate fiction. So if you're watching this and you're new to my channel, and hello, welcome. Why me? You might be wondering, why am I talking about the climate fiction long list? Well, I have a bachelor's degree in literature. I studied English literature, and then I went on to do a master's in environmental history. And I've also worked in sustainability education, and I've done a lot of climate activism. So for me, communications and how we communicate the climate crisis is kind of my whole thing. It's what I'm really interested in, because I think it's actually where it starts. Climate change is often understood as something that is to do with technology and, sticking up lots of wind turbines. But I think actually it's a lot more about how we understand the world around us, how we understand the changes that are happening. And that comes down to stories and how we communicate things. So yeah, that's why I thought it would be really interesting to go through the long list, because I feel like I have a good understanding both of how you write a good story, but also environmental history, that has a lot about the stories that we tell about humanity and about nature and about how we relate to each other. It's basically my thing. I don't know how else to phrase it. It's my whole thing. It's what I really find interesting and I know about. And yeah, if you are new here to this channel, I explore this a lot about how do we live in a dying world. The world as we know it is dying, and I think finding stories for how to reimagine how we live here, how we live through this crisis, I think is really important. Anyway, to get on to the main subject of this live stream, which is the Climate Fiction Prize long list. I haven't read any of the books on this list, and I think all of them are actually quite recent. They've been published either 2024, 2025. So yeah, that's quite exciting that they're all new fiction as well. But I have done a little bit of extra research around each of the books so that I can give a little bit more context, because what is on the website is not always super detailed or explanatory. And yes, if anyone is watching this live, I think there are a couple of people watching this live, which is very exciting. Hello, do say hi. Yeah, feel free to write in the chat comments on the books. Maybe you've read them. If you have any questions, anything, I would love to hear from you and for this to be a collaborative experience. So let's just get straight into looking at the long list. I am going to try and share my screen, and I'm quite nervous about this because I'm worried that it's not going to work. Yes, I think my screen is now being shared, and hopefully you can see the Climate Fiction Prize website. So the first book on the list is Dusk by Robbie Arnott, and they describe this as an explosive novel of the wild and the lengths human will go to control it. With escaped puma, Dusk, I think that's a badly written sentence in my opinion. There's a puma and she has escaped, and her name is Dusk. There we go. And that puma is roaming the distant highlands. Outcast twins Iris and Floyd decide to join the hunt. As they journey up into the wild, haunted country, they discover there's far more to the land and the people than they imagined. Forced to make an uneasy alliance with a fellow tracker, the twins' lifelong bond is put at risk. And as the trio close in on their prey, it becomes clear where the true danger lies. And the comment from the Climate Fiction Prize chair is that it's a climate western about two outcast siblings, a displaced animal world, and a scorched environment which explores our relationship to nature and is filled to brim with. From what I understand from having looked up this book a little bit more, the author is Australian and it is set in Western Tasmania in the 19th century, but it seems to be unclear whether it's the 19th century according to synopses I have found. Which is interesting because the word Highlands made me think of Scotland. And yeah, I think this is an interesting choice for the Climate Fiction Prize, what's the word, judging panel, to have chosen, because I think hunting is such a controversial kind of concept. And in some ways, many people argue that it's a way of getting closer to nature, because when you are hunting an animal in order to eat it, in order for subsistence, you are actually much more aware of the relationship that you have to nature. And this is something that I recently read a book called Leopardvari. Unfortunately, it's only available in Swedish and like related languages. By Kerstin Ekman. And that is a book about a man who's been a hunter his whole life, and then one day he sees a wolf and kind of everything changes and how he feels about hunting changes. But you see in that book how he has this really strong relationship with nature because he's out there all the time and he, you know, tracks these animals. He knows them well. He knows their lives and how they act well. And so I think that's probably going to be a big thing in this book is, yeah, can hunting actually be a way for us to connect to nature? Now, of course, in the modern sensibilities, hunting is generally kind of criticized as a cruel act, as something that, well, obviously, if you're trying to live a vegetarian or vegan life, then that does not align with hunting. But I think this could be a really interesting book in that sense, that it sort of raises up, well, okay, can we actually understand nature better if we're out there and understanding our place in it, even as violent hunters? But I think there's also going to be another theme in this book about control of nature, because when I looked into it a little bit, the puma Dusk was actually introduced into the landscape by humans in order to try and control the feral deer population. And now they're trying to hunt the puma because the puma keeps eating their sheep. So there's this real, it's almost like that, what's that nursery rhyme? The woman who ate a fly who eats a, it's that kind of thing of they keep trying to fix the problem and actually just maybe making it worse. And so I think there's a really interesting thing there in this novel about, how much control should we have as human beings over nature? And, sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes we're trying to help with conservation and actually we get it wrong. And like, where should we actually just leave nature to be wiser than us? Yeah, it seems like a lot of those themes will be coming up. So it seems like an interesting book. I don't know if I'll read it. I think if it's shortlisted, if it goes onto the shortlist, I would definitely be very interested. I think my only hesitation is, I don't know, the at least the framing of the way it sounds, like it's going to explore the relationship between the twins and the hunter that they collaborate with. I don't know, it sounds like it could be a little bit more about that relationship potentially, so I don't know how interested I'll be. I don't know, we'll see if it makes it onto the shortlist. Yes, going on to the second book, and I will once again try to share my screen. I really hope this is working. If anyone's watching live, please let me know if you are seeing my screen. So that's Dusk. Yes. So the next book is Every Version of You by Grace Chan. And the synopsis is, Tara Yi and her partner Navin spend most of their time inside an immersive, consumerist virtual reality called Gaia. Across the city, in the abandoned real world, Tara Yi's mother's remains stubbornly offline, dwindling away between hospital visits and memories of her earlier life in Malaysia. When a new technology is developed to permanently upload a human brain to Gaia, Tara Yi must decide what is most important, a digital future or an authentic past. And the Climate Fiction Prize judge says it is expertly and terrifyingly asks the question, would you take the chance to be quite literally uploaded to another world of bliss, or choose to stay behind and try to save this dying one instead? Yes, I think this is a really common theme in climate fiction, is like, how could we potentially escape climate change through technology? It gives me a bit of a feeling of The Deep Sky by, I should have written down the author's name because now I've forgotten it. Yume something. But yeah, that's like, how could we potentially just have a group of people that are able to financially and technologically just remove themselves from the disaster of climate change and escape? And of course, there's the big questions there about the responsibilities there and whether that's the right thing to do. But of course, people don't want to live through climate apocalypse, and some of the other books that look at more of like the survivalist, people who are left behind, it makes sense why people would want to escape. I would be interested I think this book I would definitely like to read. It sounds like my cup of tea because it's a combination of climate fiction and science fiction, and I love sci-fi, and obviously I love climate fiction. So yeah, this definitely sounds like my cup of tea, and I think I will check it out. And I will be very curious to see if it addresses the physical reality of this uploading world, like uploading your consciousness to some other what's the word? you know what I mean. Uploaded to like a cloud. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Like a digital cloud. Obviously, that kind of technology is not actually intangible. It has a physical reality. It's based on data centers and that kind of thing, right? And so I'll be interested to know if the novel addresses that side of things, because sometimes I think I don't know, I will give science fiction like a lot of leniency. I don't mind if science fiction doesn't necessarily add up and you're kind of looking at it going, well, how would that technologically work? I don't really mind if it doesn't quite technologically work. But I think when you're writing science fiction about climate stuff and you're specifically looking at the kind of the world that's being left behind and that's going to shit, I think it's interesting and almost quite necessary to think about, like, okay, but what is the actual physical infrastructure of this digital escape that people will have? So yeah, I think that's gonna be a book that I definitely would like to read. I've just seen in the chat, hello Ken, nice to see you. You can't see my screen. Okay, I will try sharing it again. This time when I'm talking about the next book, which is The Tiger's Share. It'd be great if you could let me know if you can see that whilst I'm sharing it. I'm not sharing my screen all the time, just during that point. And if it's not working, then I'll stop trying because I have no idea how to fix it, unfortunately. Yes, so. There we go. Hopefully right now you are able to see the screen. So going on to the next book in the long list, this is The Tiger's Share by Keshava Guha. I have to admit, I should have said this earlier. Apologies if I'm pronouncing any of these names wrong. I haven't been able to find like how to pronounce them, and yeah, so apologies if I'm saying any of these incorrectly. Anyway, The Tiger's Share. The fiercest wars are fought between siblings. Tara is everything her younger brother isn't. Dedicated, independent, thriving. When their father retires, he summons them to a meeting, but what he has to say threatens to tear the family apart. Tara's friend Leela has it all, but when Leela's father dies unexpectedly, her brother wastes no time in claiming what he thinks is his. Against a backdrop of ecological collapse and political unrest, together Tara and Leela are forced to confront the challenge that their ambition poses to patriarchal Delhi society. And the comment from the Climate Fiction Prize judge is, The Tiger's Share deftly uses a polluted Delhi backdrop as a metaphor for a toxic relationship between siblings caused, interestingly, by a parent's conscience over climate crisis. Okay, I'm back, and Ken is saying they can't see my screen. Okay, in which case, you're just going to have to listen to me reading out the descriptions. If you want to, you know what I can do? I can send the web address. So anyone who's watching this, if you go there, then you'll be able to like have a look at the book covers and read along with me if it helps to be able to see the writing as well. But I'll stop trying to share my screen if that's not working. What a shame. I told you, technology doesn't like me. It never agrees with me. Anyway, so The Tiger's Share sounds really interesting. And from my initial searches, apparently it has a very unusual plot. And the way that the plot is structured is very unusual. So that has me intrigued. But this one definitely sounds like it's going to brilliantly look at the social justice element of climate change, right? And the fact that climate change is not just an issue of nature, but also affects and how it happens to people, obviously, is going to involve gender differences, class differences, and when I've looked, it's not very clear from this synopsis, but when I looked further, it seems to be looking and criticising the caste system and religious hatred between groups and that kind of thing. So it definitely seems to be looking at like how the climate crisis affects people differently in different marginalized groups, which I think is a really important story to be telling. But also how climate change actually makes those problems even worse in terms of when resources become scarce, then people hatred between groups, for example, increases because when there's not enough resources to go around, people can get desperate and people are looking for scapegoats. This is something we're already seeing around the world right now. So this is a very important thing to be looking at. And I would also be really interested to read this and from the gender perspective. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what it's saying about these women in Delhi and how they're managing inheritance. That seems to be the central theme of this book, is like what you are inheriting, not just physically in terms of money from your parents potentially, but also what planet, what world are you inheriting, and this polluted city that they live in. So I think, yeah, this one's quite high up on my would like to read list from the long list. Right, the next book. So I'm not going to share my screen this time. If you would like to read along, then you can go to the link that I've set in the chat. Yes, so the next book is Helm by Sarah Hall. Helm is a ferocious, mischievous wind, a subject of folklore and awe, who has blasted the sublime landscape of the Eden Valley since the very dawn of time. Rich, wild, and vital, Helm is the story of a unique life force and of a relationship between nature and people, neither of whom can weather life without the other. The comment from the Climate Fiction Prize judge is, Hall's multi-stranded novel, part narrated by an impish wind, is never less than virtuosic. Covering centuries of humanity's attempts to meddle with the weather, it left me with a newly powerful understanding of all we stand to lose. So this is another one that I think has quite a strong chance that I will read it, because it just sounds really like, it's written partly from the point of view of the wind. I love stuff like that. I just think it's so fun. And if it's done well, it can just be, so powerful. It makes me think of When I Sing, Mountains Dance. I think I got that the right way around. It's actually a book I've talked about before on this channel in a video where I talk about climate grief. Really good book. I really recommend it. And that has sections written from the point of view of the mountains, or the point of the view of a deer, and that sort of thing. And I think that, that is where climate fiction shines. That's where all of the climate change science in the world has a very limited perspective on, and a limited understanding of how to explain things. Only fiction can personalize something like wind and make it feel real and make it sound like something that you care about. So I think that's really exciting. The one thing that I'm a bit curious about is, it seems to be, when I looked into this further, it's not super clear from that synopsis. Essentially, there's a wind, and that gives life to all of humanity. So it's kind of nature made singular, as in all of nature in this book is kind of metaphorically represented as just a singular wind. Because, and then, it covers a lot of history within the book. And then towards the end, there's a scientist who realizes that human pollution is potentially killing the wind. And so I think it's definitely meant to be, this is a metaphor, and the wind is meant to represent all of nature. And I always think it's a bit of on the one hand, that can work really well. It makes it so much more graspable to go, aha, okay, this one living being, this one thing has to keep us alive. What would we do if we realized that we were poisoning it? And, when you then extrapolate that and go, okay, well, what if we apply that to the entire planet, and that all of the myriad of ecosystems and living beings on this planet? It makes it feel a lot more obvious and tangible that we should care and have responsibility. However, I think what sometimes worries me about that sort of metaphor is that we already make nature into one being. We already refer to nature as if all of the rivers and mountains and mammals and fish and mushrooms and all of these things are just one thing, humans and nature. And I think that like the way nature is brought down into just one singular thing not only erases a lot of complexity, I think it also creates this separation, right? Because it literally makes like humans versus nature. And so it would be interesting to see how this book handles that in terms of, does it still keep the understanding of complexity and like interdependence, not this thing that we rely on versus us, but like, well, it does say in the synopsis that the wind also relies on the humanity for some reason or somehow. So that's very interesting. But yeah, magical realism is, I'm actually currently reading a book that has an element of magical realism in it, even though it's climate fiction. And I don't know why, but it really surprised me. I was like, oh yeah, why couldn't you have magical realism in climate fiction? And it's really fun. So as much as I'm expressing a little bit of doubt about the kind of about the singularity of the wind and nature, I do love a bit of magic and a bit, because I'm also a bit of a fantasy fan at the end of the day. So I love having a combination of both. Saw somebody, or Ken. Oh, okay. Oh, -20. Blimey, Ken. Going out for a run in -20. Well, thank you very much for joining. Enjoy your run, and I hope you enjoy the replay when you get back here. Anyway, I'm having a lovely cup of chamomile tea, by the way, if you want to match the cozy vibes. So on to the next book, which is Albion by Anna Hope. The Brooke family are gathering in their 18th century ancestral home to bury Philip, husband, father, and the blinding sun around which they have all orbited for as long as they can remember. With the family split over the future of the estate, dreams of rewilding and a last line of defence against the coming climate catastrophe, or a treetop haven for the super-rich, the arrival of Clara, shrouded in secrets, brings with her a truth that will fracture all the dreams on which they've built their lives. And the comment from the Climate Fiction Prize judge is, Anna Hope uses the contested ground of an English estate to ask who gets to decide the future of land in an ecological crisis. I can immediately say I don't think I'm quite as interested to read this one, because it sounds a little bit family drama, and I'm not the biggest fan of family drama. That said, I don't mean, if that's your vibe, then I think it's great to see how that, climate fiction as a genre is a bit of a difficult thing to define, because technically everything can relate to the environment, and like, where do you draw the lines? So I think it's great to have lots of different genres coming into climate fiction in itself. But I don't think this is going to be my kind of thing, but that's fine. Maybe it's somebody else's, and that's the whole point. Anyway, I think what is interesting in terms of why they've picked this one out is it seems to be, once again, it's about the intersection of social justice and climate change. In terms of, who gets to do what and who has the power over the land and what happens with the land. And so it actually reminds me quite a lot of The Tiger's Share, right? It's a family drama. Actually, maybe I'm being a bit unfair to say that I wouldn't read this one because it's a family drama, but I would read The Tiger's Share, which is also a family drama. So maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical there. I just think the setting and the context of The Tiger's Share sounds a bit more interesting to me. I don't know if it's maybe it's because I'm British, and so just like reading about, an English estate, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. I want to read something new and something like, from a world that I don't know and that I don't recognize. I want to learn something new. I think that's why I'm having that response. Anyway, but I definitely see, especially when I put it like that, Albion and The Tiger's Share, they feel like opposite ends of the same spectrum. Like, they're both family dramas. They're both about inheritance. They're both about who gets to do what with the land. How do we cope with the climate crisis? Who has responsibility? And how does class affect how you can act and what you can do? But whereas the tiger's share seems to be coming from this perspective of like a polluted city, and women in a society that seems to not want to let them have any power, versus Albion, this is a family with an estate. They're clearly quite rich and have power, and they're trying to use that for good, and they're trying to do rewilding. But you know, how do you rewild? How much influence should humans have? How much should we be putting our fingers in there? So, you know what? I'm now regretting what I said. Maybe it would be interesting to read this one at the same, like maybe read it like straight after the tiger's share. Have that direct comparison. That could be really fun. We'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of books, and there's a lot of other books I already want to read. There's too many books in the world. I want to read all of them, and I don't have enough time. But you know, depending on how things go, hopefully I will one day read this one. So, I'm using my tea to remind myself to slow down. I get too excited when I'm talking about books, and I tend to speak faster and faster and less clearly. So I'm using the tea to try and calm me down. I hope that's okay with anyone who is watching this. So the next book is Awake in the Floating City by Susanna Kwan. Bo knows she should go. Years of rain have drowned the city, and almost everyone else has fled. But when the health of Mia, a prickly elderly lady Bo cares for, deteriorates, Bo determines to honour their disappearing world and the women and the woman who brought her back to it, a project that teaches her the lessons that matter most: how to care, how to be present, how to commemorate a life and a place soon to be lost forever. And the Climate Fiction Prize judge comment is, Susanna Kwan writes climate change into the grain of ordinary life, allowing us into the intimate world of loss, love, and attention. So, small spoiler-ish. It's not. If you Google the book, you'll find this. It's set in San Francisco. I was very curious which city is meant to have been sort of flooded and have disappeared. It's San Francisco, which is interesting because the author comes from San Francisco. So I think that's nice, actually, when an author writes about something that they know, like how the first one, Robbie Arnott, was writing in Western Tasmania, and that is where he lives. I think it lends a lot of strength to a novel when the writer writes in the landscape and the ecosystem that they know. And yeah, I think this book really interests me from an environmental history perspective, because it is a lot about history and losing history, the danger of losing history, losing the history of a place and of a person. And because when I researched this book a bit further, the younger woman, Bo, she's an artist, and she's like trying to work out how to create art. And what happens is that when she meets the woman, the elderly woman, she's like, oh, I should try and write down this woman's history or record this woman's history. And how do you record the place as well? How do you record the city? So I think that's really, I think environmental history is a still misunderstood and underexplored subject. And I might be biased because I studied environmental history, but I you know, when I tell people, oh, I've studied environmental history, so often the first question is just like, what is that? Because climate change and the environment, people immediately think to the future. But of course, we can learn a lot from history, and actually some of our strongest solutions have historical bases. But this is a lot more, this story, Awake in the Floating City, is a lot more of a personal one. How do you record and remember a place? How do you record and remember a person? And also that it seems to be climate change made small, as in it brings it down to that personal level of two individuals trying to work out how to survive in a city that is drowning. And so it reminds me, I've mentioned this already, the book that I'm currently reading, Light Pirate, which has an element of magical realism. But what that book does so brilliantly is it captures what, like, the individual lives. You are following a single family and you're seeing them trying to survive all of these different climate disasters, and it just makes, oh, climate change is going to cause more hurricanes. And then you actually get to see what that means for an individual family. It really just brings it home. And it seems that this book is going to do much of the same thing. Oh, San Francisco gets flooded. Okay, you can understand that conceptually, abstractly, but it's when you come down to those individual stories that it makes it feel real. So yeah, this one definitely looks very interesting to me, and I would like to check it out. The next book on the list is The Price of Everything by John McGoran. So this one's a thriller, so I feel like I should read it in this like dramatic way, but I won't, but it feels like I should, because corporations fall, gangsters are killed, but no one messes with the Couriers Guild. Armand Pierce is a courier. The delivery is everything. It's the Guild's guarantee. And since the internet went down in the cyber wars, all business, legitimate or otherwise, depends on it. Otherwise, he dies. So when he arrives at his latest destination to find his payload missing and something going on that threatens to upend the global order, Pierce had better get to the bottom of it before the Guild catches up to him. And the comment from the Climate Fiction Prize judge is, a page-turning, exciting thriller set in a world that forces the hero to ask the inconvenient question of how do you save the world when corporations have taken over all governance? Everyone carries guns, and you just wanted a quiet life, but it's just not an option anymore. Oh, hello, Emil. I've just seen you pop up in the chat. Hi, welcome. Yes, so this one sounds like a big old anti-capitalist book, so I'm a fan in terms of, it's definitely questioning the power of corporations and can they actually help us survive and keep us alive. And so it reminds me a bit of Blackfish City in terms of this very futuristic, very corporate, heavy future world. And uncovering the problems of exploitation and the profit motive and how that can endanger us all in the end. I don't know if I will actually read this one, though. I'm not the biggest fan of thrillers, I wouldn't say. And there's something about the synopsis that just sounds a bit kind of, I don't know. Is it going to be so much about climate change, or is it going to be more about the thriller element and the kind of the mystery element, which is, again, fine. Like I said earlier, I think what's really exciting about climate fiction is that it can actually, like all other genres, can come under climate fiction, and I think that is important because it can encourage everyone to be reading and engaging with these stories. I don't know if I will read it personally, but I mean, on the other hand, it seems very anti-capitalist, and if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a big old anti-capitalist, so maybe I should read it. We'll see. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted now because as I said earlier, I'm powering this by the power of candlelight because I don't have any decent lighting, and I've got a candle disaster happening beneath me. So I'm just gonna move this because it's leaking wax. Okay, right. Crisis averted. Where was I? On to the next book by Hum by Helen Phillips. Let's have a look. So, in a new future world addled by climate change and inhabited by intelligent robots called Hums, May loses her job to artificial intelligence. Man, this is, telling me it's near future. It's freaking present day. Anyway, desperate to resolve her family's debt and secure their future for another few months, she becomes a guinea pig in an experiment that alters her face so it cannot be recognized by surveillance. A novel that delves into the complexities of marriage, motherhood, and selfhood in a world compromised by global warming and dizzying technological advancement, a world of both dystopian and utopian possibilities. And the Climate Fiction Prize judge comment is that this is beautiful and intimate. This novel about the difficulties of love and care in a world which is increasingly mediated by technology is one I found myself thinking about long after finishing the last page. So this one is actually one that I've come across before somehow, somewhere. I'm not sure why, but it was on my to-read list already. It's caught my attention. I think probably mostly because of what it says about parenthood and the fact that it addresses motherhood, parenthood, and how we handle that in a changing world, because I have been reading Maya Lunde's Climate Quartet series, which the first of which is the most famous, History of the Bees. And I'm currently on the 4th book, so I'm nearly finished. And the thread for all of those books is parenthood. It's how do you look after your own children in a changing world, but also, are we parents to nature? Is that our responsibility? So I think that's why this one caught my attention, because it says it's about motherhood and how we look after each other. But of course, this one, unlike Maya Lunde, is a lot more focused on, sorry, just knocked the microphone. Apologies. This one is a lot more about the technology and artificial intelligence. And I don't know, obviously you can't know exactly when an author wrote a book. You can know when it's published, you don't know when it's written. I wonder if this is pre or post today's AI, and whether it was inspired by what we have today, or whether it was actually more predictive. But definitely it looks like it's going to be, yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting one, looking at technology and when does technology go too far? When do we just not need it? If people are losing their job and they're not able to survive, then what benefit is the AI giving us? What is benefit is the robots giving us? Yeah, it sounds like a kind of mix of like The Matrix with climate fiction, actually, now I think about it. But then with a dose of Maya Lunde. I don't know, this could be a really interesting book. I think I would definitely like to check it out. And I think the fact it says a world of both dystopian and utopian possibilities, that's the sweet spot, man. You know, a good utopia always has elements of dystopia, and a good dystopia always has elements of utopia. So I think that sounds really interesting. It's like, because obviously what I mean by that is some people are going to get a utopia, some people are going to get a dystopia, and it's about who gets which one. And I think that's always raising really interesting questions about inequality and social justice in the sphere of climate change. The next book is Endling by Maria Riva. Yiva, oh, that's confusing. Okay, the author's name is Maria Riva, but the name of the character is Yiva. Oh, I mean, I could be pronouncing this wrong, and I do apologize if I am. But anyway, just to clarify that, because it sounded a bit unclear. Yiva is a maverick Ukrainian scientist trying and failing to breed rare snails while dating plenty of men, not for love, but to fund her work. Nastia and her sister Solomia are also entangled in the booming marriage industry, while secretly searching for their missing mother, who vanished after years of fierce activism. So begins a journey of a lifetime, across a country on the brink of war. 3 angry women, a truck full of kidnapped bachelors, and Lefty, a last-of-his-kind snail with one final shot at perpetuating, very different words there, perpetuating his species. And the Climate Fiction Prize judge comment is, against a backdrop of war, crushing inequality, and families in danger, this powerful book makes the unlikely case for saving a snail and reminds us that giving up is not only wrong, but profoundly boring. I think that's a really interesting comment to say it's boring to give up. It makes me really curious about the book and how it's presenting the idea of giving up. And this is another one that I think there's a high chance I want to read all of these books. There's not enough time. But this one's another one that I think looks particularly interesting, partly because of the political commentary. Maria Riva is Ukrainian herself. She was born in Ukraine and grew up in Canada. And So I think it would be really fantastic to read. I haven't read anything by a Ukrainian author, so that would be a first, and that would be really interesting. And so obviously there's going to be a lot of, I think we can expect political commentary there about war and perhaps even the ecocide that comes along with war. So that sounds really interesting. And I've just seen Emil, boring to give up is such a good phrase. Damn, yeah, I give, right? I also really, jumped out of me, like that it's giving up is not only wrong, but profoundly boring. Like, it's so true as well. Like, part of the reason to try and keep going in the climate crisis is because of all of the beauty of the world, right? And how exciting our diverse world is. And to give up and let it all die, well, then the world's going to become very boring. It's maybe a silly way of phrasing it, but I think it's true. And yeah, the other thing that really interests me about this book is the fact that it seems to be partially written from this point of view of a snail. I love that shit. As I mentioned earlier with which one was it? What's it called again? Helm, the one that's right from the point. I think I just heard something fall off my wall. Oh well. Yeah, writing from the point of view of the wind, and I think it can have such profound, interesting interpretations of nature. Writing from the point of view of a snail also sounds great. I want to know what a snail is thinking. I mean, I think it's always a careful balance because sometimes it can feel a little bit performative when people try and write in the perspective of an animal. But again, if it's done right, like when I read When Mountains Sing, When I Sing, Mountains Dance, that one showed me, it doesn't have to be bad. It can be done really, really well. And let's hope that this is a case of that. But also the fact that it really gets across inhabiting another creature and how every life should be valued and how, it can be important to save even a snail, even the things that we think are ugly or unpleasant are worth our attention and worth our saving. And actually, that is a subject that's going to be the subject of my next YouTube video. So I'm going to stop there, otherwise I will talk too much about it. But if that concept of like, how do we pay attention to the things that we don't normally pay attention to? You should stick around and watch my video next week. Anywho, on to the next book. After a good slurp of tea. We've got 4 books left, by the way, if you're wondering. So this one is The Book of Records by Madeleine Tien. Why did people who lived so briefly in this universe contain so much time? Lena and her ailing father have taken refuge at an enclave called the Sea, a staging post between migrations. In this mysterious building, pasts and futures collide as Lena comes to understand the role of fate in history in a book which explores our search for home and the place of faith and humanity in our world. In the Climate Fiction Prize, comment is a dreamlike, powerful book about a group of stranded refugees turning to storytelling, binding together their own past, history, and stories of refugees of the past to find hope for them. Sorry. For Climate Fiction Prize judges, some of these comments are written with very strange grammar that makes it very difficult to read. I'm going to try that again. A dreamlike, powerful book about a group of stranded refugees turning to storytelling, binding together their own past, history, and stories of refugees of the past to find hope for them and us, the reader. That still didn't really make sense. I'm sorry. I think the idea is that it's about refugees, migration, storytelling, history, all of that kind of good stuff. So again, as an environmental historian, sounds really interesting to me. I couldn't find much more about because I think this synopsis is a bit like vague, and I was curious, and I couldn't find much more about what happens in the book. I think it's a bit more of a thought experiment kind of book where it's just exploring the importance of history generally, which again, as an environmental historian, I'm a big fan of because it's in history that we can find keys to the future, in my opinion. But also I think it's great that this is another book that's centering climate migration, and I think there's more and more awareness of it these days, but the climate crisis is going to cause a lot of people to have to migrate and become refugees. And I think any book that's exploring that is really important, because currently, today, we've got a lot of refugees from various places, and they are being demonized by right-wing press normally. And so stories or books that tell stories about these refugees and humanizes them and makes people realize, aha, these are just desperate people being forced to leave a particular place, I think is really important today as a story to tell. And I think it's interesting that it's combining like migration and history as two themes, because humans also have a long history of migrating. So it's kind of, I don't know if I can quite wrap that up actually as a concise point, but hopefully you understand what I mean in terms of, yeah, the importance of recognizing that migration is a natural part of human history, and the demonizing of certain groups of people does not help anyone. So, on to the next book, Juice by Tim Winton. Survival is only the beginning. Two fugitives, a man and a child, drive across a stony desert. As dawn breaks, they roll into an abandoned mine site. They're exhausted, traumatized, desperate now. This is a forsaken place, but as a refuge, it's the most promising they've seen. The child peers at the field of desolation. The man thinks to himself, this could work. Problem is, they're not alone. The Climate Fiction Prize comment is, and hopefully this one has better grammar for me to read, this is an utterly propulsive and unput-downable novel set in a dystopia in which we recognize our world of climate damage. Tim Winton pits those who resist by any means necessary against those who deny and abnegate responsibility, and adds a twist of Scheherazade-style storytelling. A powerful book in which a quietly contained rage burns off the page. So this definitely sounds like a survivalist story, right? Climate change is hit. The dystopia is here. Everything's gone to crap. How are people looking to survive? This one is set in the future. It's not about what we can do now, but what would happen if we reach that point. And it gives me big Parable of the Sower vibes, actually, by Octavia Butler, which is really quite ahead of its time in some ways. When was that one written? It was the 80s, I think. Parable of the Sower, a sci-fi book about, a future where climate change has made the world practically unlivable, and about like the violence that people turn to. I think it's really interesting reading these sorts of books that are looking at survivalism. How could we survive when shit has really hit the fan? I find it it's depressing as fuck normally. Excuse my French, but like it's true. It's depressing to read about these worlds. And sometimes I find when I'm reading them going, this could actually be our future. This is not just like an imaginary, like, oh, la la la, imagine if there was a dystopia. It's like, no, this could legitimately happen. It's really depressing and really scary, but I also find it quite powerful, and I find it a good kick up the arse, actually, because it makes me think about, what am I doing to make sure that I can survive? What am I doing to make sure that I am self-sufficient and not relying on a society and on a structure, like a social structure, that's going to fall apart? How am I going to prepare? And so these books are always quite inspiring, like in a really harsh, painful way. And it will be interesting to see. So Tim Winton is he's Australian. It'd be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of stories like this. There's a lot of climate fiction where it's like set in the far future. or actually not even that far these days, but it's set in the future and everything's gone to shit and everyone's just trying to survive. It's always interesting to see what people add to the story, what things they, uniquely bring. And I think obviously the different places that these books are set and those in unique landscapes is a big part of what each new book brings. And yeah, I'm curious what element, well, they say it's unputdownable. That's the main reason that they seem to have chosen, that it's just like a really gripping book. So that's, yeah, I might check it out. I might well check it out. So we're now on to the last book here on the list. This one is Sunbirth by Anne Yu. The town fell on hard times long before the sun began to shrink, but now, every few days, a new sliver disappears. As the temperature drops and the lake freezes over, the inhabitants of the town realize that there is no way they can survive. But when the beacons appear, ordinary people with heads replaced by searing, blinding light, like miniature suns, the residents wonder if they may hold the answer to their salvation, or if they are just another sign of impending ruin. And the Climate Fiction Prize comment is, this dystopia about two sisters, a family mystery, and a fast disappearing sun weaves the everyday and domestic with climate catastrophe and other worldly elements so deftly. It asks important questions too of what we do when we have reached the point of no return. Stay put or flee, while always remaining highly readable. I wasn't able to find much more information about this book. And I think it's also interesting that is it the only? No, like Helm, it's one that's not really about our climate crisis. It's in a different world where there's a different kind of climate crisis. In this case, the sun is shrinking, which is interesting. It's interesting in the sense that it does the opposite of what we're experiencing, which is generally global warming. And, I'm really curious. I mean, it just sounds, it's basically this synopsis leaves me with a lot of questions. I'm really wondering about like, where is it going? Who are these people with suns as heads? Sounds like a really, really interesting concept for sure. And looking at sort of hope in other people. And I think it's going to touch on ideas of faith, right? These people turn up with with suns for heads. And are they salvation or ruin? Like, yeah, there's definitely going to be some religious or faith-based imagery in there that I think I'm curious. But I don't know if I have much to say about this book because I think it's like the least, there's something about it that strikes me as the least climate fiction-y. Even though it very much is climate fiction, I think, and it's been chosen by this prize, so I think it is climate fiction. But it's dealing with it in quite a different way, which in a way makes it the most interesting selection of all of them, because it's like, aha, where's this going? But it also means that I'm like, not sure what to say about it. So yes, that is now all 12 books. And I'm sorry that I haven't been able to like share my screen whilst doing this. And so that you had something to look at. I'll see if I can fix that for the next time that I potentially do a live stream. I don't know why it wasn't working. It should have been working. I told you, technology hates me. Anyway, so looking at the list, oh, sorry, that must have been really loud. I really apologize. I hope that was okay. Looking at the list as a whole, something that struck me and I think is really interesting is that it's very Australasia. Is that the word? Oceania? Oh, I'm really showing up my lack of geography knowledge right now. The part of the world with like Australia, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan. That's Australasia, right? Oh my God. I should have double checked this. I'm sorry. My geography. I studied environmental history, not environmental geography. Anyway, a lot of the books come from that part of the world. There are 2 books from Australia. There's one from India. And then there is, 1, 2, 3, for 5 authors of East Asian heritage. So I think that's really interesting, partly because I remember when I was looking at the list from 2025, that list was very Africa heavy. You had a lot of authors from the African continent. And so it feels like almost like they've tried to balance it out this year and do a different continent. I think it's very, very cool and very good that this prize is very global. It is based officially in the UK, but absolutely the literature is being chosen from around the world, and they're really looking to platform authors from around the world. So that's really cool. I just think it would be nice if they had a bit more of a balance every year, rather than what seems to have happened is that last year was Africa and this year was Asia, which just feels a bit strange. But I don't know. Maybe it's to do with who is on the judging panel, to be fair. And it's just to do with like the books that they know about, because of, maybe it's where the judging panel is largely from. And for me, I think, I'm trying to think what I've read. So far, I've read a lot of Nordic climate fiction because I live in Sweden and I want to be reading books in Swedish to practice my Swedish. And I think it's really powerful to read books about the landscape that you know and live in, because it teaches you about those landscapes. And so, yes, I haven't necessarily had a huge amount of diversity in the books that I've read so far. It's definitely mostly been Nordic and US. I was actually trying to think if I've read any climate fiction from the UK. And I'm not sure I have. Anyway, so I think that's a really inspiring thing. I put a lot of the books from last year onto my to-read list. So that means I should hopefully get to read some stories from various countries in Africa, which is very exciting. And if I read some of these books from this list, then I'll get lots of stories from well, that's the interesting thing. I think a lot of the authors, to be fair, are of Asian heritage, East Asian heritage, but maybe the books are still set in America. I think Sunbirth might be the exception to that rule. Yes. And then the Book of Records, for example, is just kind of unclear where it's set. It's like set in the sea or something. Anyway, point is, I think it's really important to have diversity, and it's really important to have authors from around the world. And I'm really glad to see that the Climate Fiction Prize is prioritizing that. I think it's a bit strange that they seem to have this, one particular focus per year so far, but the prize has only been going for 2 years. They might just still be like trying to figure out exactly how they want to be doing all of this stuff. The other thing that I noticed as a pattern in a lot of these books is, I think most of them are about, am I misjudging that? No, I think that's fair to say. Most of them are about survival after everything's gone to shit. Some of them about how can we escape through technology. Some of them about how are we going to survive in a desolate wasteland where there's nothing left. That sort of thing. Or like in a capitalist wasteland as well, in a world where just profit motive. I'm thinking here of The Price of Everything by John McGoran. Yeah, where capitalism has wreaked havoc on society. So I think it's interesting that they seem to be platforming stories of kind of dystopian stories, actually, of survival in the future, rather than more here and now stories about climate fiction. About climate change, sorry. You do have a couple, like The Tiger's Share and Albion. In fact, are those the only two? Sorry, I'm just looking through my list and... Oh, Dusk. Dusk is the other exception to that rule, because it's set in the 19th century, so it's set before. So that's interesting. Yeah. So it is the majority are set in like dystopian futures, and I think a lot of climate fiction does end up being set in dystopian futures, which I think I enjoy. I like science fiction. I like dystopia. I like imagining futures, even if they're depressing futures. But it's also sometimes I'm like, but climate change is here now. There are things happening now. Climate change is already happening. What stories could we be telling about that? And it seems a shame, a little bit of a shame, that it's two of the books, 2 of the 12 are set in the present day and are about climate change affecting people today and how people are acting today. And then one is set in the past and that's Dusk, and that's about how we relate to nature, specifically through hunting. So there's, it's quite a heavy bias there. I would like to see more books about climate change today, but maybe they don't really exist. I have to admit, when I've been looking for climate fiction books or just anything about climate change that isn't non-fiction, you get an awful lot of dystopia. And I think it's because climate change is still in our culture imagined as a future problem. It's imagined as a problem for our children still to this day, even though we can see the disasters happening right now and we know that they're happening right now. So I think it would be nice to see, not just to see climate fiction about the here and now of climate change, but also to see the Climate Fiction Prize, which I think is actually having quite a lot of influence on the discussion about climate fiction. I would like to see them doing a bit more platforming of that. I hope that made sense, what I just said. It's kind of hard to explain exactly what I mean. But yes, in conclusion, a lot of these books, very intriguing, very interested to check them out. Probably won't manage to read all of them. Might use the shortlist that's going to come out in... Oh, I wrote it down, but no, I can't remember. The winner's going to be announced in May, and I think the shortlist is announced is like roughly the midpoint, at the end of March. So I might use the shortlist the official shortlist to bring down the number of books that I want to read from this, but definitely going to check out a lot of them. So, yes, there have been people popping in and out of this live stream, which has been very nice to know that there's somebody out there listening to me. If you're watching this back in the future, thank you ever so much for watching. If this is your jam, if you like books and you like, I doubt you like climate change, but if you're interested in climate change, and you are interested about stories and about how we can use fiction and non-fiction books to understand environmentalism and climate change and how we should be living as we watch the world as we know it die, subscribe, because that is what I do here on this channel. I talk about books, I talk about music, I make my own music, I write poetry, I write short stories. Oh, that's a spoiler. That's a spoiler for an upcoming video. But yes, basically, point is, if you've enjoyed this live stream, which I hope you have, check out the rest of my channel. You might well find some interesting ideas and wisdoms about how to cope with the climate crisis, which is feeling very scary at the moment. It's just been feeling increasingly scary, and I think it's really important to talk about it and to feel like we're not alone and to have a sense of community. Yes, so all of that is just, that was me trying to avoid the classic phrase of like, share and subscribe, but essentially that, like, share and subscribe. I've added this live stream already, hopefully, to the playlist that I've got called Books for a Dying World. That's where you can find the other videos where I talk about books. And yes, this is going to be up as a live stream, as an actual video on my channel. So if you write a comment, if you have any thoughts, if you've read any of these books, if you want to read any of these books, please do leave a comment below. I would really, really love to hear what other people have to say about these books. But I think that's enough waffling from me. Again, thank you so much for joining. Apologies for technological issues. I'll see if I can get slightly better lighting next time. The candle's done its best, but I realise I'm a bit dark. Yes, sorry, I just never know how to end things. Okay, right. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.